Okay, good evening, everybody. My host, please confirm you can hear me.
Hello, we can hear you, Prof.
All right, thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Okay, good evening once again. I want to welcome you to this class. I want to believe you have a very good day. So we are going to continue from where we stopped last time. Last time we met, we started leases, and we were able to look at the new requirements under lease accounting. That's IFRS 16. So the last time we said a lease is a contract that, or part of a contract conveys the right to use an underlying asset for a period of time in exchange for consideration, okay? And we also went ahead to look at what constitutes a control for the lessee. And we said for a contract to contain a lease, it must transfer the right to control the use of an underlying asset. Okay, so and substantially all the economic benefits associated with the asset they flow to the lessee. Okay, and secondly, the lessee has the right to direct the use of the asset. Okay, so we also went ahead to look at a situation whereby restrictions within the lease does form part of the scope of the contract. Okay, so we're able to establish that if the lessor puts some restrictions within the scope of the lease contract, okay, so far that does not affect the right of the lessee to control or to direct the use of that asset. So it's also a lease. However, if the lessor has the practical ability to exchange or substitute the item or the asset, and it's going to be practically economically viable for the lessor to do so. So that means it is not a lease. And then we look at the leases accounting. That is the key aspect under the new standard, IFRS 16. So we said at the commencement of the lease, okay, the lessee must recognize a lease liability and a right of use asset. The lessee must recognize a lease liability and a right of use asset. So we went ahead to look at what makes up a right of use asset. Okay, so that is the present value of lease payment that has not yet been paid. So all you need to look out for is what now makes my lease payment. Okay, so you look at the fixed payment, you look at the variable payment, you look at residual value guarantee. Okay, option to purchase the asset if it's going to be it's usable, it's going to be exercised, and termination penalties, right? So anything, any of those that you find in an exam question, then that gives you your lease payment. Then you have to add it together and then discount to present value. Okay, so to get your figure for your lease payment. Okay, and we also went ahead to look at right of use asset. Okay, so initially you measure a right of use asset at cost, right? That's the initial measurement. You have to measure it at cost. So what constitutes the initial measurement of a right of use asset? You have four of them, if you can remember. Okay, so we have the initial amount of the lease liability, okay, that you just calculated. Then you look at the direct cost. Okay, so direct cost is also part of the what's it called? Part of the initial cost. Then you have the cost of dismantling or decommissioning the asset. Okay, so those constitute the cost of the asset. Then we also look at the lease term. Okay, I think if you can remember, three things constitute lease term. The first one is the non-cancelable period. Okay, period to extend if it's going to exercise, period not to extend if it will not be exercised. So when you look at those three, then that is it. So on subsequent measurement, okay, the finance cost will increase the carrying amount of the lease liability, whereas cash payments will reduce the carrying amount. So in that case, you are going to do your lease liability table. You can remember, you look at your year, you look at your opening, you look at your interest, okay, you look at the payment, then you look at your closing, okay. So the difference between the carrying amount as at the beginning, as at the first year, and the other year is the current liability, okay. But the money that will be due or the amount that will be due in subsequent year is your non-current liability, okay. So I think we also checked separating components, okay. So that is when you have a contract that contains lease component and a non-lease component. Okay, I guess that's where we stopped the last time, right? Okay, so in that case, I think I was able to generate a formula for you. So as per IFRS 16, you are going to look at the consideration. Okay, so the consideration will be applied based on the proportion on the standalone selling price. Okay, so you are going to apportion the consideration on the standalone selling price. So for you to get your lease payment that will now be discounted to present value. So we're able to generate a formula. So if I can remember that formula, okay, can I record the formula? Okay, standalone, standalone price over the total list price. That's the standalone, the total standalone price, and multiplied by the consideration. Okay, so you can put that at your fingertips. So that would be very, very lovely. Okay. So that would be very lovely. Please show what you are saying. I'm only recapping what we did last time. So you have the notes there. I'm only recapping what we did the last time so that I can refresh your memory before we continue. So this is where we are starting from today. Lessor accounting. Okay. So I can't be scrolling up because I already have the notes. So I'm just recapping. Okay. All right. So that's how you do your components, separating components. So today we are going to continue. So in the next 30 minutes, we should be able to complete IFRS 16. So we go to IFRS 1. We have time, we look at IAS 20. Okay, so maybe from next week, we look at IFRS for SMEs, IAS 19, employee benefits, IFRS 2, share-based payments. So from upper week, I think it would be right for you to start your group accounting, right? And the last week again, we return back to standards. And I'm hoping I'm going to use a session to recap all the standard in 90 minutes, right? Okay, yeah, you should be able to do that. Okay, so let's find out. Lessor accounting is quite straightforward, okay? Don't forget, what we did as our last week is leases accounting, which was not under IAS 17 rather, okay? So now, that's what we did the last time and we stopped. We've been able to look at that. It's quite simple, right? So what happens on part of the lessor, okay? So this section already existed, still existed under IAS 17, right? That's leases, it still existed, okay? So, but let's see some little modification and the new things that we added. So a lessor must classify lease as either finance lease or what? Operating lease. You remember when we did substance over form, I think I touched on finance and operating lease, right? So regardless of, don't forget, regardless of the way the lessee, whether operating or finance lease, doesn't really bother the lessee's accounting, okay? So the lessee will just recognize two things, right of use asset and a lease liability. That's it, right? But from the lessor's perspective, I'm sure you know who the lessor, you know you are the lessor, right? I'm the lessee, okay? So that was the example I gave the other time. So you are the lessor, I'm the lessee. So you gave me your keke napep under a lease arrangement, right? So you are the lessor. So I have done my accounting. So I'm supposed to recognize a right of use asset and a lease liability. So on your part, what do? So you either classify a lease as finance lease or an operating lease. So a finance lease is a lease where risk and reward of the underlying assets substantially transfer to the lessee. Okay, so the risk and reward will substantially transfer to the lessee. That's a finance lease. So obviously, when you give me your container pen, right, the risk, okay, that means I bear maintenance costs, I do insurance, okay, and the reward, that's the economic benefit, you have transferred to me under finance lease arrangement. So in that case, that is finance lease. So operating lease is any lease that does not meet the definition of finance lease. Okay, so don't expect the examiner to be asking you what is finance lease or what is operating lease. But as I always say, we need that information so that it will help us to approach question. Now, IFRS 16 went ahead to give us information or indicators of a finance lease. So are you saying that? How to classify a lease? So IFRS 16 states that a lease is probably a finance lease if one or more of the following apply. So not necessarily you are going to see all these conditions. So when one or more of them applies in a contract, so obviously it's going to be a finance lease. Okay, so if ownership transfer to the lessee at the end of the lease. So when you gave me your keke napep, at the end of the lease, ownership will transfer to me. So obviously it's a finance lease. Okay, the lessee has the option to purchase the asset for less than its expected fair value at the date of the option becomes exercisable, and it's reasonably certain that the option will be exercised. So obviously, if within the contract, there's an option for me as a lessee to purchase the asset less than the expected fair value, okay? And it's reasonably certain I'm going to exercise the option, okay? So that is, we can classify it as finance lease. Then the lease term, including secondary periods, for a major part of the economic life, okay? I think I remember I also mentioned this when we did substantive outcome. So if the economic useful life is, let's say, 50 years, okay, and the lease time is around 40 to 45 or 48 years, so it's significant. So obviously, it's going to be a finance lease, okay? Now, another point is at the inception of the lease, the present value of the lease payment amount to at least substantially all of the fair value of the lease asset. What was that supposed to mean? By the time the lease payment that has not yet been paid, by the time I discount to present value, okay? So the present value it now amounts substantially to the fair value of the lease asset. That means as at that date, if you compare it with the fair value, it's almost the same, okay? So obviously, it could also be an indicator that it's a finance lease arrangement. Now, the lease assets are of specialized nature so that only the lessee can use them without major modification being made to them, okay? So only the lessee can use it without any major modification. For example, the lessor cannot withdraw, the asset or alter anything about the asset, okay? So it's also a finance lease. Then the lessee will compensate the lessor for losses if the lease is cancelled, of course. So most likely, when you are under a finance lease arrangement, there's always a clause that if you cancel the lease, then all the losses will be borne by the lessee and not the lessor. So it's also an example of an indicator that the contract is a lease, right? Now, gains and losses or losses from fluctuations in the fair value of the residual fall to lessee, for example, by means of rebate of lease payment. Okay, so if that will also be borne by the lessee, then the lessee can continue the lessee for a secondary period. What do you mean by secondary period? For example, the initial period is, let's say, 10 years, right? Okay, and you have a secondary period to say you can use it for life. Even after 10 years, continue to use that second period. But the main period is 10 years, okay? So, but for you to determine a secondary period, that's period of extension, right? So in exchange for substantially lower than market rent payment, okay? So you may not really put all this in your head, but at least you should be able to understand 1, 2, or 3, or 4 of them, okay? So if you see any of this in a list question, then it's a finance lease. So any other contract that doesn't have any of those features, for example, the risk and reward remain with the lessor, obviously that is an operating lease. Okay, so let's look at this example. to determine whether we can identify whether this lease is an operating or finance lease. That boy is a lessor and is drawing up a lease agreement for a building. The building has a remaining economic life of 50 years. The lease term, which would commence on 1st January 20X0, is for 30 years. That boy will receive 40% of asset value upfront from the lessee. At the end of each of the 30 years, that boy will receive 6% of the asset value as at 1st January 20X0. Legal title at the end of the lease remains with that boy, but the lessee can continue to lease the asset indefinitely for at a renter that is substantially below its market value. If the lessee cancels the lease, it may make a payment to that boy to recover the remaining investment required per IFRS 16. Should the lease be classified as an operating lease or finance lease? Okay, all right. So how do we do this? Now, when you see those percentages, the percentage is 6%, so you might be wondering, am I going to do any calculation? You obviously no, okay, but you might do some little mathematics to further solidify your point. So let's look at the question. So how do we break it down? So what the examiner requires us is to identify whether this contract is a finance or operating lease, okay? So we are going to watch out for those indicators that we mentioned just now. Okay, so let's find out whether we can see that. So they said that boy is a lessor and is drawing up a lease agreement for a building. Okay, that's fine. All right, and the building has a remaining economic life of 50 years. Okay, that's fine. And the lease term is for 30 years. So the question is 30 years substantial in relation to 50 years? Okay, so some people might say, oh, well, it may not be substantial, but at least it's more than half. Okay, it's more than 25 years, which is the half. So that might still indicate maybe it's still within operating or finance lease, so we might not really be too sure. So let's continue. That boy will receive 40% of the asset value upfront from the lessee. Okay, now they now told us that at the end of the 30 years, that boy receives 6% of the asset fair value. You know, we mentioned something about the asset fair value the other time. Okay, now they now said that one also might still not give us a value reason, right? So let's continue. Now, legal title at the end of the lease remains with that boy. This suggests that's an operating lease. But now we need to find out, but the lessee can continue to lease the asset indefinitely, all right? Okay, it can continue to lease the asset indefinitely at a rental that is substantially low, okay, below its market value, okay. Can you remember this point that we made somewhere here, okay? When we talk about the secondary, what's it called now? Okay, this is the lease can continue to lease for a secondary period in exchange for substantially lower than market rent payment. Okay, so that's a very nice point there. So that's indicative of the fact that this is a finance lease. Now it must make a payment to that boy to recover the remaining investment. Okay, so that suggests that it's the finance lease. So let's look at the what the solution looks like, whether we even get it right. A finance lease, okay. So anytime you want to answer this kind of question, you come with the principle. Okay, so what's the principle? The definition: a finance lease is defined as a leasing where the risk and reward of ownership transfer to the lessor. So the key indicators are this. Okay, can you remember? So we just mentioned it. So anyone you remember, you just tell the examiner. Okay, so let's now continue. So the lease term is only for 60%. Can you see? 30 years over 50 years. So of the asset useful life. Okay. Also, legal title does not pass at the end of the lease. So this factor suggests an operating. Okay, can you see now? That's what we just said, right? So that lease term, right, it's not really significant, although some people might judge that probably is more than the half, okay? But you know, IFRS 16 is not really explicit about it. Just said should be significant. So when you look at 50 years, you might say 40, 45, 48 is quite significant. and the fact that legal title will not pass, all right? So that suggests it's an operating lease. But wait. Don't forget, if you see any of those points that we highlighted just now, there is a finance lease, okay? However, okay, the leasing can continue. Can you see now? To lease the asset at the end of the lease term for a value substantially below the market value. Can you see that was the point I raised earlier? Okay, so this suggests that the lessee will benefit from building over its useful life, and is therefore an indication of a finance lease. So if I can go on, okay, to lease the asset substantially below its market value, which is also the fair value, so that means the lessee will benefit. So that means the reward incidental to to the asset will probably flow to the lessee. Okay, so the lessee is also unable to cancel the lease without paying. Okay, can you see that? So if you have to cancel, then that means you have to pay. So it's also part of the indicator. So this is an indication that anybody is guaranteed to recoup the investment, and therefore may have relinquished risk of ownership. Okay. Now it also seems like that the present value of the minimum lease payment will be substantially all of the asset fair value. Okay. So if the minimum lease payment during discount equal 40% of the fair value payable upfront, then another 180, that's just that 6% that will be collected or that will be received at the end of the lease term. Okay, so therefore, this again suggests that the lease is a finance lease. So all things considered would appear to be a finance lease. So that's how you break it down and tell the examiner. So all you need to learn is those principles. So once any of those principles feature, don't forget one or all of them, one or more of them. Once you see it in any contract or in any question, then it appears to be a finance lease. Okay. Now, so let's now go to finance lease now. Okay. Don't forget, the lessor should either or must either classify a contract as a lease contract as a finance lease or operating lease. Operating lease is quite simple. You just apply, you just recognize your rental income on a straight line basis. But let's look at what happens under finance lease. Let's come into operating lease. Then we go to sales and leaseback, and that's the end of IFRS 16 leases, right? Okay. Sorry. Now, on initial treatment, now you have to be with me now, okay? On initial treatment, that means at the inception of a lease, the lessor must present assets held under finance lease as a receivable. Okay. All right. So you have to present it as a receivable. Okay. That means it's an asset, right? So within your current assets, you have to present it as receivable. So the value of your receivable is the present value of fixed payment. Now listen to me. Now, what constitutes my receivable? Let me give you a joker here, okay? You don't need to learn new thing here. The only thing you need to learn here is this, that the lessor must present the asset held under finance lease as a receivable. That's the only thing you are learning here. Now, what constitutes my receivable? We have already learned it. If you have been following the class, right? Or if you were in the previous class 2 days ago, right? So now remember, let me quickly bring you back to that. Remember when we said at the commencement of the lease, that's under leases accounting. Okay, the lessee must recognize a right of use asset and a lease liability. Can you remember? Okay, now, and we said for a lease liability, it is the present value of lease payment that has not yet been paid. And we went ahead to look at what constitutes my present value. Can you remember? Fixed payment, variable payment, residual value guarantee. Okay, it's the same thing as here. That's it. That's how you learn it. So you don't need to learn any new thing. The only thing that was added is unguaranteed residual value. That's the only thing that constitutes my receivable under finance lease arrangement on initial recognition. Okay, purchase options, if it will be exercised, termination penalties. Okay, so the only thing that was added is unguaranteed residual value. So you're not learning any big deal. So if you remember that, it's the same thing under the initial treatment or receivable. Okay, so that's it, right? So you don't need to waste time there because I emphasized so much on it the last class. So let's now look at subsequent treatment. Okay, subsequent. That's how to read. Okay, so you just have to be, strategic when you read. So it's the same. My receivable and my lease payment, okay, they are the same present value when I'm trying to calculate my present value, okay. So, but don't forget that this is also a present value, right? So you have to do the present. Now, I'm sure everybody can do present value now, right? Okay. So once you have that, then you now hold it as a receivable after you have considered it. Don't forget, all of these will not feature in the exam, but any of them will feature. But I'm quite sure fixed payment will always feature. Okay, we always feature. Now let's now look at subsequent treatment. That's my subsequent measurements. So what happened? Now the current amount of lease. Now let me recall again. I just want you to understand, right? Now if you remember, under my present value of lease liability after I've calculated on initial measurement. Now on subsequent measurement, the carrying amount of my lease liability will be increased by the finance charges. Can you remember? That means you debit your P or L and the credit your lease liability. And the carrying amount of my lease liability will be reduced by cash payment. So if you can remember that, that's fine, right? Okay, so let's now come back here. Now, because it is receivable under the, what's it called? Under the finance, the lease source accounting, okay? So the carrying amount of lease receivable is increased by finance income earned, okay? So that means on subsequent measurement, how much am I expecting, right? It's going to be increased. The lease receivable will be increased by the finance income, okay, which is credited to my POL account, okay? Whereas the carrying amount will be reduced by cash receipt. That's it. So the carrying amount of my lease receivable will be reduced by cash receipt. It's as simple as that, okay? So that's all you need to know, okay? Now, so let's now look at an example to demonstrate what we have just said. Now, Vache leases machinery to Toro. Okay, now the lease is for 4 years at an annual cost of 2,000 payable annually in arrears. The present value of lease payment is 5,710. The interest rate implicit in the lease is 15% required. How should Vache account for their net investment in the lease? Okay, all right. So I look at this question. How do we break it down? Now, Vache leases machinery to Toro. Okay, so if I lease machinery to Toro, that means Vache is the lessor. Then I come to the requirement. The examiner is asking me, how should Vache? Okay, now the examiner is saying, my student, how will you account for resource accounting? That's what the examiner is asking for, because it's already saying, how should Vache account for their net? I know already. Okay, so what do I need to know? On my initial recognition, I have to classify it as receivable. So I have to look at the present value of the what? Of the fixed payment, variable payment, residual value guarantee, unguaranteed residual value, can you remember? And termination penalties. Okay, so, and I ask the question, where is all these components? Okay, the lease time is already giving us 4 years, okay, and at an annual cost of 2,000 payable annually in arrears, okay. So this is the amount I'll be paying annually. The Toro is expected to be paying annually in arrears. So I will now ask, where is my component of my receivable? Okay. So the examiner now said the present value of lease payment. Now they have given me the figure. So I don't need to run away or run eta to calculate the present value. That's why you need to pay attention to detail. So I've been given the present value, which is this, okay? And the implicit interest rate is 5%. So since I've been given the present value, then I'll now go ahead. What will now be my, don't forget, once you have your present value, all you need to do is to recognize it within your receivable. That's the way you explain to the examiner. So I will now go to my subsequent measurement. And I remember that the kind amount of my receivable will be increased by finance income that is due, right? And the kind amount of that same receivable will also be reduced by cash receipt. Okay, so that's it. So now That's what you do. So let's now look at, and you now classify into current and non-current, just the way we did the last time. Okay, but in this case, it's the least source accounting. So if you look here now, so virtually we recognize the net investment as receivable. This is the present value. Can you see now? That's the present value. Just recognize it as simple as that. But if you're not giving the present value, okay, since I'm already giving the 15% discount rate, all you need to do is to discount to the present value, okay? Year 1, year 2, year 3, as the case may be. Yeah, you look at your cash flows. Now that cash flows will be the summation of your fixed payment, variable payment, residual value guarantee, termination penalties, as the case may be, okay? You now use your discount factor, you multiply it, add the figures together, it will give you your present value, okay? But here, since you already have the knowledge of the present value, so that's why we are not wasting time now on that. So you just go ahead and recognize it as receivable. So on subsequent measurement, what will now happen? Okay, so now tell the examiner that the receivable will be increased by financed income. The receivable is now reduced by cash receipts. Can you see now? Can you remember our lease liability table? Okay, can you remember? Okay, you know, I recap when we started this class. Okay, so your years, your opening balance here, it will not be the interest, it will not be the finance income. Okay, now it will not be cash payment, it will not be cash received and the closing balance. It's the same, right? So you are just changing the finance income. You know, the other one is interest because you are calculating lease liability there. But here we are calculating our receivable. Then you have your cash received and you have your closing balance. So this is the present value. Can you remember that same present value? That's what you bring down as your opening balance. So you now calculate, now bring down your calculator and start pressing now. Okay, and your calculator, if you calculate 15% of 5710, it should give you 856. If you are not getting 856, it simply means that your calculator has been impaired. Okay, simply means your calculator has been impaired. So all you need to do is to apply IFRS 5 on your calculator. All right, and IFRS 5 talks about asset classified as held for sale. But don't forget that before you can do that, it simply means that the carrying amount of that your calculator can only be recovered through sale rather than continuing use. That is if you are not getting this right. Okay, all right. Now the cash received, the cash received is 2,000, so to reduce the carrying amount. So all you need to do is add 5710 plus, because the finance income will increase the carrying amount, okay, plus 856, then cash received will reduce the carrying amount, minus 2,000, then it has to give you this figure, okay? That's to give you this figure. So now that's how you do. So the figure, the closing balance in year 1 will now become my opening balance in year 2. You need to practice this, okay? As I'm showing you, it's simple, Abi. You are laughing, Abi, and you are smiling. Hey, this is very simple. Okay, you need to practice, okay? By the time you want to solve it, you now see that, hey, this is, okay, so you need to practice. So go and practice so that you are used to it, especially those headers, okay? Because I'm sure by the time you practice this and you get here, by the time you want to do year 2, you'll be confused. I'm very sure, yeah, you'll be confused. Actually, you are not looking at the answer and solving it. For people that are looking at the answer and solving it, won't have issue, okay? But you don't need to be looking at the answer when you're solving, right? Okay. So you do the same thing here. You also apply 15% on this figure. That's 4566. All right. So you add it to 685. So you get it. All right. Until the last year. Okay. That it will now be 0. Okay. So what is now my my receivable? So my receivable will be 3251. Okay. So if I remove 3251 from 4566, it will be my current asset. Okay, all right. It will be my current asset. Sorry. Let me go back there. Okay. Let me see. Okay, so in your statement of financial position, so you have to classify it as, you know, current and non-current. So you now call it net investment in lease. Okay. So that's your second year. Can you see the figure there? All right. So that's what we have here. Okay. And current asset, net investment in finance lease, that is the same name. So you simply remove 3251 from 4566. So to give you this figure. Okay. That's a simple way to do it. If you want to go by way of complex analysis, you can now do this. So you now say the current asset is the next installment less next year's interest. So what's my next installment? 2,000, Abi. Okay, minus next year's interest, 685. Okay. So what's the figure? It will still give me this. Okay. But you don't need to bother yourself with that. So simply remove 3251 from this. Okay. So the same thing with your assets. So the remainder will now be your current, what's it called? Current asset. Okay, so that's that. So that's how you do your finance list. It's as simple as that. So anytime you see a question on finance list, just remember that on initial recognition, the lessor must recognize a receivable, and your receivable is the present value of your fixed payment, variable payment, residual value guarantee, even unguaranteed residual value, termination penalties, and the likes, right? So, and on subsequent measurement, you need to remember that the current amount of my receivable will be increased by the what's it called now, finance income, okay, and it's going to be reduced by cash receipt, okay, it's going to be reduced by cash receipt, okay. Now let's now go to we are moving, we'll soon be through. So let's go to operating list. Don't forget, we are still under lessor's accounting, okay, because the lessor must either classify a list as finance list or as operating list. So we have checked out finance list. So what happens when we have an operating list? Okay, a lessor will recognize income from an operating list on a straight line basis. Now I mentioned it earlier. Okay, it has to be done on a straight line basis. So how much am I collecting? How much? That was the total. I divide it over the list time. It's as simple as that, right? And any direct cost of negotiating the finance list, any direct cost of negotiating the finance list will also be added as part of the cost of the underlying asset. So the underlying asset will now be depreciated in accordance with, in accordance with what's it called? IAS 16 or IAS 38, intangible asset, right? Okay, so that's it. It's as simple as that. So just remember that in lessor's accounting, it has to recognize income on operating list or from operating list on a straight line basis over the list time. It's simple, so simple, right? Okay. Exercise. So let's look at this exercise. OROC hires out an industrial plant on a long-term operating lease. On 1st January 20X1, it entered into a 7-year lease on a mobile crane. Now, the lease term for the lease are 175,000 payable on 1st January. Okay, so this will be payable immediately, right? Okay, followed by six rentals of 70,000 payable from the next year. Okay, from 1st January 20X to 20X7. That's fine. The crane will be returned to OROC on 31st December 20X7. That means at the end of the lease time to come back. Okay, so it's an operating list. Even if the examiner did not tell me here, okay, if the examiner did not tell me here that is an operating list, that this statement already means it's an operating list. Okay, now the crane originally cost 880 and has a 25-year useful life with no residual value. Discuss the accounting treatment of the above in the year ended 31st December 2020. Okay, so if I say a kind of question like this, you know, a lot of things is fine in my head. So if they were talking about OROC here, hires out a plant on a long-term operating lease, okay? Hires out, right? Not hires in, hires out, okay? So that means OROC is a lessor, okay? And on 1st January, it now enters into a 7-year lease on a mobile crane, okay? And the lease term is that it's going to pay this amount payable, okay? So all I need to do is, what is my rental income, okay? What is my rental income? So the rental income is 175,000 initial payment and followed by 6 rentals. So that will be 70 times 6, okay? 70 times 6. So I'm going to add it to this to give me my rental income. And how many years is the lease time divided by 7? That's it. That's it. Okay. So, but don't forget, since I'm recognizing it upfront, so I'm going to recognize what we call a deferred income. Okay. A deferred income. I will explain deferred income to you. When we check out IAS 20 again, I will emphasize on what is meant by a deferred income. I'm sure some of you already know it. Okay. So, but the crane originally cost this. So this one will also be depreciated over 25 years. That's it. That's it. Okay. So that's how you analyze that question. So let's see what the answer looks like. Okay. Orock hold a crane in its financial statement and depreciate over the useful life. So annual depreciation, can you see now? So that's it. That's how you start. Okay. So you depreciate it over the 25 years. Now you now come back to the rental income. Okay. So which must be recognized in the profit or loss on a straight line basis. So my total receipt, can you see now? Total receipt, that's it. 70 multiplied by that 6 years plus the initial payment. That's it. Okay. So if I have this amount, that's the total. But don't forget that this is paid now. Okay. Then the annual rental income will now be 85. That means the total amount divided by my 7 years. Okay. That is, I will now be releasing this amount. You know, I will recognize this amount almost immediately. So in my statement of financial position, I will now do what we call a deferred income. Okay, within my current and non-current liability. Okay, so how will I do that? The initial payment that was made, okay, I will now remove it from the annual rental income. So this is the balance I have. So it has to be deferred, okay, because I can't recognize it now. Don't forget, when we did 5,955,000 over 7, we have already included this amount, which is already paid now, okay? And we also included this amount that has not been paid, okay? So that's why we are recognizing the deferred income element. So the best way you can go about it is to remove it back from this annual income that's already calculated, which is embedded from the total amount, okay? So you now recognize 90,000. So that's it. So that's the operating list, and by its operating list, it cannot be as bigger than that. So anytime you see operating list, all you need to do is the finance income will be recognized on a straight line basis over the list time. That's it. And the asset itself will be depreciated in line with either IAS 16 or IAS 38. Okay. So let's now look at the last part. That's disclosures. You know, I've told you, you don't need to bother yourself about disclosure for the purpose of the exam. But if you are doing this in practice, of course, you need to, bother about it. So the material has been carefully prepared, okay, to cater for your exams, and you can also use that as a guide in practice, right? You know, I think I told you the other time that all those list liability tables, they are very good in advanced Excel. You just formularize it. Even basic Excel, not even advanced. Basic Excel, just formularize it, make sure your formulas are correct. Keep checking it, okay? Then you inside those figures, everything will come, right? So that's fine. Okay, so let's look at sales and lease back. Okay, now let me lay some foundation here. I was thinking we used about 30 minutes. We are almost using how many minutes now? Okay, so let's continue. Anyway, this is the last part. Okay, but sales and lease back is different, divided into two. Okay, so when it is done at fair value and when it is not done at fair value. So that's the last point, right? Okay, sales and lease back. Okay, this is it. Let me just explain before I come back to the notes. So this is sales and lease back. So don't forget, you are the lessor in the examples we've been using since the beginning of IFRS 16. You are the lessor. I am the lessee, right? You are the lessor. I'm the lessee. Now, because you needed money, okay, maybe to finance your operations, you are cash strapped, all right? So you now thought of selling one of your assets to me, okay? So that's what we call sales, right? So once we sell it, or once we enter into a contract, we need to determine whether it constitutes a sale in accordance with IFRS 15, revenue from contract with customer. That's why if you must apply IFRS 16 earlier, before its effective day, you must have applied IFRS 15. Okay, this is one of the reasons. Okay, so you sold your asset or any of your property or whatever to me. Okay, so we have to check whether that contract contains it's a revenue contract, right? That's IFRS 15. Revenue from contract with customers. I'm hoping we should be able to do that next week. I'm hoping, right? Okay, so so now if it's a sale, that's fine, that's fine. If it's a sale, that's fine. If it's not a sale, you're going to treat it as a loan, right? You're going to treat it as a loan. But if it's a sale, that means you allow what we call substance over form to prevail, right? Now, so if it's a sale, but because you needed money to finance your operation, you now list that asset back from me. Okay, you list it back. So in that case, you are the seller lessee. You sold it and you list it back. So you are the seller lessee, okay? Me that bought it, I am the buyer lessor because I'm listing it back to you, okay? So that's what we call sales and lease back. You sold an asset and you lease it back, okay? You actually needed an asset for your operations. Just because you are cash strapped, you needed money, that's why you are selling and you are, leasing back, okay? So that's what we have there. So if an entity, which is the seller, I've explained that now, right? Which is the seller lessee, transfers an asset to another entity, the buyer lessor, which is me, I'm buying from you and I'm leasing it back to you, okay? Okay, and then lease it back. IFRS 15 requires that both entities should assess whether the transfer should be accounted for as a sale, okay? Because once it's not a sale, it's a problem. It has to be treated as a loan. So for this purpose, you now need to apply IFRS 15, okay, to decide whether a performance obligation has been satisfied. So this normally occurs when the customer obtains control of the promised asset, and control of the asset, the ability to gain control, okay, to have to ability to obtain substantially all the remaining benefits. I've explained that one over and over. Okay, so let's now continue. If the transfer is not a sale, okay, if the transfer is not a sale, then IFRS 16 simply says that the transfer proceeds should be treated as a loan. It's as simple as that, okay? Just treat it as a loan. Once is not a sale. So you need to understand this point properly. So I'm hoping or I'm thinking the examiner can give you a scenario question, okay? All right, and all you need to do is to identify whether it is a sale and lease back, okay? Once it is not a sale, it simply means that the person you are transferring to does not have a control. Don't forget, we already established that a contract will contains a lease if it transfer the right to control. Don't forget, okay? So if it doesn't transfer that right and it's not really a sale, then the proceeds should be treated as a loan, and your loan is a liability, right? That you'll be repaying back. Okay, so let's now check it out if it is a sale. Okay, let's check it out if it is a sale. Now, if the transaction is a sale, that means you have applied IFRS 15. That means now the seller lessee. Now listen. It simply means that the seller lessee, we have to derecognize that asset, okay, and recognize what we call a right of use asset. So how do you do that? Okay, so the lessor lessee must now measure the right of use asset as the proportion of the previous carrying amount that relates to the right obtained or retained, right? Okay, so you have to measure. Now listen to me, because in the example I'm giving, you are the one that is selling. So you sold and you lease back. When you sell that asset, it has to go out of your balance sheet, right? So you have to derecognize it. Now you are now leasing it back. You now recognize a right of use asset. So the question is, at what amount? Okay, so it has to be measured at the proportion of the previous carrying amount that relate to the right obtained. Okay, all right. So that's that. So you need to put that in your head, how to measure it. Okay, you need to put it in your head. Now, this means that the seller lessee will now will recognize profit or loss based on the right transfer. When you are selling, or normally when you dispose an asset, either you make a gain or you make a loss. So whether you have a gain or loss, you also recognize. So the buyer lessor will now account for the asset purchased using normal accounting model or standard, maybe IFRS 16, as the case may be. And the lease is now accounted for by applying the lessor accounting requirement. Can you remember when you now recognize a receivable? Okay, all right. Now, so let's look at this question to demonstrate our understanding. Now, if it is a sale, okay, if it is a sale, so you have to measure the right of use asset in proportion of the previous carrying amount that is related to the right retained. Okay, so the right of use asset should now be measured at the proportion of the previous carrying amount that relate to the right retained. That's what we are applying in this question. So that's what we want to do. All you need to do is just to pass accounting entries. As simple as that. So on 1st January 20X1, painting sales an item of machinery to college at fair value of 3 million. Okay, the asset had a carrying amount of 1.2 prior to sale. Okay, now this sale represents the satisfaction of performance obligation in accordance with IFRS 15. Painting enters into a contract with Cottage for right of use of the asset for the next 5 years. Annual payment of 500,000 are due at the end of each year. Now, the interest rate implicit in the lease is 10%. The present value of the annual lease payment is 1.9. They've calculated already. Okay, so the remaining economic useful life of the machine is much greater than the lease time. Okay, explain how the transaction will be accounted for on 1st January 20X1 by both painting and college. So all I need to identify is who is the seller lessee and who is the buyer lessor. Okay, so I go back to the question and I ask the question: can you supply me who is the buyer lessor and who is the seller lessee? So on that date, painting sell. So since painting is selling, so is the seller lessee to Cottage at a fair value. Okay, so what will I now do? Now you have to deal with me. Okay, you have to deal with me. So what I've done here again is to generate a formula for you to do. You know, when you see a question like this, all you need to remember is that the right of use asset should be measured at the proportion of the previous carrying amount that relate to the right obtained. So how do I now measure at the proportion of previous carrying amount? So if you have your pen and a plain paper, can you put this formula down? So this is the formula you are going to use, okay? Can you put the formula down? So that's what we want to do now. You are going to say present value, okay? You are writing PV of annual lease payment. Present value of, what's it called? Annual lease payment, okay? Divided by fair value, okay, divided by fair value, multiplied by previous carrying amount. You know, that's the proportion, okay? That's the proportion because you need to measure it. Can I say that again? Present value of annual lease payment all over fair value, okay? Present value of annual lease payment all over fair value multiplied by previous carrying amount. That's it. That's the formula you are using. Okay, so if the examiner did not give me present value of annual lease payment, if the examiner did not give me present value of annual lease payment, what would I do? I need to look for my fixed payment, variable payment, they will give me, and I need to discount to my present value. Okay, so if I look at the question now, what is the PV? Okay, what is the PV? Where is the examiner telling me there's a PV? So if you look at this line, the top paragraph, the present value of annual lease payment is 1.9 million. Okay, so I find that. Then how much, what is the fair value when it was sold? So the fair value was 3 million. Can you see that? Then I will now multiply it by the previous carrying amount prior to the sale. Okay, so that's how you measure it. Okay, all right, so let's now look at how this will be done in the books of Cottage. Can you see now? So painting in college accounting and painting. So we start from painting. Painting is the seller seller lessee, right? So you now say painting must remove the carrying amount of the machine. Like I said, you are passing an entry. So you have to remove it from the financial position, and instead you now need to now recognize a right of use asset. Can you remember? And this right of use asset will now be measured at the proportion of previous carrying amount that relate to the right obtained. Okay, so if you apply the formula I gave you the other time, you are going to get this figure. Will you get that figure? Okay, will you get the figure, right? Okay. Okay, so you're going to get that figure. Okay, yes, you get the figure. You get this zero, that's 760,000. Okay, so press your calculator and use that figure, use that formula. So no textbook will give you the formula, but that's the way you can remember. Just say your PV of annual lease payment, which is your 1.9 million, okay, divided by my fair value, multiplied by my previous carrying amount, okay, and you get that figure. So you now do your entry. So when you sell, what do you do? In the book of painting, you collect cash. That 3 million, you're going to debit, okay? and you also debit right of use asset because that's the new measurement, okay? And you must derecognize the initial carrying amount. Can you remember? That's the previous carrying amount. So you have to derecognize. That's where you credit your machine. And you now credit a lease liability because you need to pay. That's your annual lease payment. Okay? You are going to credit your lease liability. We have already been given the present value. Okay? So you credit. Now, how do I now get my balancing figure? You can get your balancing figures in two ways. There is a short method and there is another formula that you can use to get your balancing figure. But if I should give you that formula might be too much, okay? So after, let me give you the shortcut. I'll also give you the formula. So you can decide to pick anyone you want to pick, Okay, so how do I get this 660,000.6 million? Okay, how do I get this, right? All you need to do is this. Add all your debits together after you have passed the entry. Add your debit together, okay? Then add your credit together. Then you remove it, so you should have this figure. Okay, that's short for that's the what's it called? That's the shortcut, right? So that's the shortcut. Simply add all your debit together because normally your debit amount must equal your credit amount. So if they are not, if they don't equal, the difference will now be taken to profit or loss account. Okay, so you now have to credit. Okay, so why am I crediting? Because this is higher. Okay, these two are higher or is higher than this, so that's why we are crediting. Okay, so but if you don't want to use that way, you can use another way. So what you need to do is to say fair value. You still get the same figure. I think it's somewhere there. Let me see. Okay, can you see now? So this is another way you can get it. Okay, this is another way. So all you need to do is you say fair value minus my present value of annual lease payment divided by fair value, then multiply by gain on disposal. How do I get my gain on disposal? Okay, so let's go back to the question. Let me show you how you get your gain on disposal. How much was my carrying amount? 1.2 million. Okay, how much did I sell? I sold it at 3 million. So if you remove 3 million from 1.2 million, you will get 1.8 million. Okay, so that's how we get our gain on disposal. So if you do that, that's why it is credited to my income statement. So let me say the formula again. Fair value minus my PV of annual lease payment divided by fair value multiplied by gain on disposal. As I said, that formula might be confusing you. Okay, so if it's confusing you, just add this together and remove it from there. So you also have your balance set. It's as simple as that. But if you are very professional, okay, and you know what you are doing, you can come here and do this. Okay, so in the book of college, so who is the college now? So college is the one that will now debit the machine and credit cash. Okay, to debit the machine by 3 million and credit cash. So that's it. Okay, so that's it. So normal resource accounting rule will apply. Now you have to be with me here. What we have done here was because the sale was done at fair value. Okay, the sale was done at fair value. So what happens when a sale was not done at fair value? That's the sales and lease back now. What happens? Two things will happen. Okay, when a sale is not done at fair value, that's what we want to look at for now. Transactions is not done at fair value. Now listen, you have to be with me. This is the last aspect of IFRS 16. Okay, I'm sure Suwan. No, but we need to continue, right? So this is the last aspect, right? Okay, I was thinking I would use about 30 minutes to finish off this, but I needed you to understand. That's why I was taking my time. Right from the session, I already said I'll use two lecture to demonstrate IFRS 16 to you guys, right? So that's what I've been doing. IFRS 1 will take us 20 minutes, but because I just like to explain, so it might be 40 minutes, right? Okay, now transaction is not at fair value. Like I said, two things will happen. All these things must be in your head. That's your national anthem, right? I've given you a lot of national anthem. I don't think, can you even remember your national anthem? What's the first one? Can you remember? Okay. Okay. So it has to be in your head. So the best way you can master all of this is before you sleep tonight, no matter how tired you are, go through it. And when you wake up tomorrow morning, after your prayers and the likes, you go through it again. Just squeeze time to go through it. Inside traffic, when you're at work, if you have the time, right? So just go through them. Don't pile it up, right? So it keeps going into your brain, right? Let's see. Now, I said two things will happen. It's either you sell below the fair value, all right, or the transaction is done below the fair value or above the fair value. Okay. So when it is done below the fair value, it's quite simple. You treat it as prepayment of lease. Okay. You treat it as prepayment. That's just pretty straightforward. Okay. So if sales proceeds or lease payments are not at fair value, that means IFRS 16 requires that below market value, when sales proceeds are less than the fair value, you treat it as prepayment of lease payment, right? Then if you now sell it above, for example, the fair value is 3 million, but it was sold at 4 million, okay? The fair value is 3 million, but it was sold at 4 million. So what happened is you treat that difference as an additional finance. So how do we now do that? That's the headache. So that's what we want to illustrate in a question now. So how do you treat above sales proceed or sales proceed that is above the asset fair value? How do we treat it in the account? Okay, so let's look at this illustration. Okay, on 1st January 20x1, Mosaic sells an item of property, plant, and equipment, an item of machine to ceramic for 3 million. Okay, its fair value was 2.8. Something is calling me. Okay, the sale was done at 3 million, but the fair value was 2.8. Okay, so IFRS 16 is calling me because the fair value was 3 million, but it was sold. Sorry, the fair value was 2.8 million, but the sales proceed was 3 million. So the difference, that's 200,000, will be treated as additional finance. How do we do that? We're going to find out shortly, right? Now, the asset had a kind amount of 1.2 million prior to the sale. So this sale represents the satisfaction of IFRS 15. Mosaic enters into a contract with Ceramic for the right of use asset for the next 5 years. So annual payment is 500,000, which are due each year. So the interest rate implicit was 10% rather, and the present value of annual lease payment is 1.9 million. Now listen, why are they giving us present value here? Because we have already treated present value. So in some questions, even if it says and lease back, it will not give you the present value. So you need to calculate it. Okay. So this 10% is not there for fun, right? But because we have been giving, that's fine. So it's because we have learned it, so we don't need to be repeating it, in all questions, right? So in the requirement, explain how the transaction will be accounted for. Can you see? We're not told it's leases based on the requirement, but from the question, we were told that Mosaic sell, okay, machinery. Now, the same Mosaic now enters into a contract with Ceramic for the right of use of that same asset. So it's a sale and lease back. Then I need to ask myself, was it done at fair value below? Was it done at fair value? Yes, it was done at fair value. We just do it straight up the way we did the initial what's it called? The initial exercise, right? But it was not done at fair value, okay? Because I was told that the sale was done at 3 million, whereas the fair value was 2.8 million. So it was not done at fair value. Then I ask myself again, was the sales above or below the fair value? If it was below the fair value, that means I will simply treat it as the payment of lease. But if it was above the fair value, I will treat it as additional finance. Okay, so I have what's it called, 200,000 that will now be treated as additional finance. What it simply means is this. Now be with me here. This is what IFRS 16 is assuming. Okay, this is what IFRS 16 is assuming. IFRS 16 is assuming that this present value, okay, this present value of annual lease payment of 1.9 million, okay, has already been, part of it has already been paid initially when this transaction was done. So the difference between 3 million and 2.8 million will now be removed here. That's the meaning. That's what IFRS 16 is assuming. That's what they call it. That's why they call it additional finance. So when I'm now considering my present value of annual lease payment, I will remove that 200,000 from that 1.9. It will now be 1.7. Then I continue my normal treatment. Okay, that's it. It's as simple as that. That's it. Okay, so let's find out. So the excess sales proceed, which is 200,000, that is this, is treated as additional finance. Can you see? So that's what we just said. Now look here. The present value of the lease payment was 1.9. It's assumed. Can you see now? That 0.2 million, that's 200,000, relate to additional finance that Mosaic has been given. Can you see? So the remaining 1.7 relate to the lease. That's it. That's it. That's all you need to know. That's all. That's all. So if you can explain that to the examiner, you are good to go. Okay. You now do your normal what's it called? Accounting, your sales and this one, just pass your normal entry. So when you are now doing, don't forget that anytime you have sales and lease back, right, the right of use assets should be measured at the proportion of the previous carrying amount, right, that relate to the right retained. So you have to remove it by derecognizing the asset and measure. That's what here. So you now use that formula again. Can you remember that formula? Can you remember? Can I recall it? PV, okay, of annual lease payment over fair value multiplied by the what's it called? Previous carrying amount. So after you have removed that 0.2, your new PV of lease payment will now be 1.7, okay. And somebody can be asking me a question. What if I was not giving the PV, okay, and this applies? So after you have calculated after you have discounted to present value, you now remove. That's it, right? You have to calculate, you have to discount to present value, then you now remove, right? So they're divided by my what's it called? Fair value, okay, that's 2.8, then multiplied by my previous carrying amount. So I have this figure. So I will now pass my entry, okay? So you debit your cash with that 3 million as sales proceed. Then you debit right of use asset with this figure, okay? Then you also remove the machine from your books. Your lease liability is 170. Can you remember that's your present value of your lease payment? Then that 2 million that was paid earlier will now be a liability again. So the balancing figure will be 0.630, right? 0.630,000. Okay. So how do I get this figure? Okay, this is a shortcut. Simply add this together. Okay, add this together and remove it from the debit. Okay, so this is higher than this, so the balance will now be credited to my profit or loss. But if you don't want to do it that way, you can simply do the second formula that I gave you. Can you remember? My fair value minus my PV of annual lease payment over fair value multiplied by gain on disposal. Okay, multiplied by gain on disposal. How did we get the gain on disposal? Okay, it was sold. The gain was our 2.8 million, if you can remember. Okay, let me find out what did they call that 2.8 million from the question. Okay, the fair value, yeah, the fair value rather. Okay, so the fair value. Okay, so you're going to use the fair value minus, that's the real fair value. So here you're not using the sales price. The other question we use the sales price because it was equal to the fair value. Okay, so that to get your gain on disposal, then you now multiply it with the gain on disposal, right? So you now multiply it by the gain of disposal after dividing it by the fair value. Okay, so then you go to ceramic account. That one is quite simple, right? So you just do the accounting entry. But we are not done yet. We are not done yet. Don't forget in the question, we were given annual, annual payment, okay, that was due each year. So we need to calculate the proportion that will be, the payment and the receipt in the question. So the payment receipt will now be allocated on the lease, okay? So you use my, what's it called? This is my 1.7. This is my new PV of annual lease payment divided by the original one, the old one, right? So you multiply by 500 to give this figure. That will be the payment received allocated to lease, and the payment received allocated to additional finance. It's still the same. So you now use the difference, that difference between the fair value and the sales proceed, then divided by the PV to get this. So to get this figure. So that's that. Okay. So that brings us to the end of IFRS 16. What's it called now? Leases, okay? Leases. All right, leases. So it was effective 1st January 2019. Okay, but an earlier application is allowed provided you have complied with IFRS 15. Okay, so you have some questions here for your review, so you can lay your hands on it to further solidify your understanding. So if you're having issues with those questions, you can easily let me know. Okay, so before we go, let's quickly look at IFRS 1, first time adoption of IFRS. Okay, so this one is just explanation, right? It's just explanation, and it's quite straightforward. Okay, don't forget when we started, if you remember, when we started, I made mention of adoption of IFRS in Nigeria, that it was done in 3 phases, phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3, right? And you know, that was after the convergence, okay, where all countries of the world comes together or came together, okay, as the case may be, and there was need to have a single financial reporting, okay, or a uniform financial reporting. And that's what led to the emergence of international financial reporting standards, okay. So the first standard that was issued under IFRS was IFRS 1, first time adoption of IFRS. So what it means is if an entity is adopting IFRS for the first time, you can be adopting IFRS for the first time on 2 occasions. You might be an existing company, but before 2012, okay, before 2012, when Nigeria adopts IFRS, okay, you have been applying SAS and probably IAS, okay. You have been applying statement of accounting standard, that's Nigerian GAAP, and probably IAS, right? So when we now said, okay, we are adopting IFRS, so as an entity, for the first time, you now need to do what we call conversion into IFRS, okay? So that means all your accounting policies, all your program, your chart of accounts, okay, your program in the system need to be, you know, converted. A lot of consulting firms made a hell of money in those years because they were trying to, you know, convert entities accounting system so that it will comply with IFRS, okay? So if a new company is coming up within 2012, 2013, 2014 up to today, obviously you are going to adopt IFRS. So, but IFRS 1 may not necessarily apply, okay? But you apply to existing companies. So the objective of IFRS 1 is to provide guidance on first-time adopter, or is it adopter now, of IFRS, okay? So when you're adopting it for the first time, what are the things you look out for, okay? So what are the exemptions that was granted? What are the things you must recognize? What disclosure you need to do, okay? What compliance statement you need to do? Because as per Nigeria was concerned, they have to put it into law that every company must adopt IFRS at a particular day. If you remember when we did on phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. So after 2014, 2012, 2013, 2014, all companies in Nigeria complied with IFRS, okay? Except for certain industries that they still comply or they still use SAS. If you remember, I think there are 4 of them, okay? SAS 14, that's the downstream sector of the oil and gas. SAS 17, that's the upstream sector. And SAS 25, that's telecommunication. And SAS 32, that's accounting for not-for-profit making organization. So they still apply SAS in compliance or in conjunction with IFRS. Okay. So IFRS and IAS. I think I've also explained the difference between IFRS and IAS to you. Okay. Okay. So anytime there's an amendment to IAS, so it becomes IFRS. And anytime they are issuing a new standard, they will not issue it under IAS. That's to be IFRS. Okay. So over time, we might not see IAS again, maybe in the next 10 years, if all the current standards under IAS has been amended. So, and I think I gave some example. For example, IAS 18 was amended So it becomes IFRS 15, revenue from contract with customers. Even IAS 17 was amended, so it becomes IFRS 16. Okay. Which other one? IAS 39 was amended, so it becomes IFRS 9, financial instruments. Okay, so that's that's the difference, right? Okay, so what I'll just show you. I won't bother you too much with IFRS 1, but I will show you key areas you need to know. For example, the examiner might ask you, why do you think an entity may want to adopt IFRS? Okay, even if you don't read it after tonight, I'm sure you will be able to write something down because you heard me speaking tonight. Okay, because I know some of you are putting me on loudspeaker, some of you are recording me, right? That's fine. Okay, so so the examiner can give you a scenario-based question, and the requirement is, can you give us reasons why you think an entity will adopt IFRS? Or they can tell you that some companies directors have been, they've been having meetings considering adopting IFRS, but they don't really know the benefits to gain from it. Okay, so this is what you tell the examiner. Okay, for example, an entity may be seeking a listing, and listing rules may require the use of IFRS. Obviously, you can't be seeking to be listed in Nigerian Stock Exchange, for example, and your account is not IFRS compliant. Okay, so because of that, obviously, you might need to adopt IFRS. Okay, entities who have no expectation of seeking a listing may also choose to adopt IFRS if they perceive IFRS to be more relevant to their situation. Because you can imagine, obviously, all over the world is now one uniform financial reporting. So is it your company that want to be left over? Okay, is it want to be using your local national GAAP? No way. So every company is adopting, so you may also be thinking, it's going to be relevant to my situation. So that's why you want to do that. Now, unlisted multinational corporate groups may also choose to adopt IFRS as the basis for financial reporting throughout the group. Okay, so this will save time and resource in preparing management information throughout the group and streamlining streamlining the group the group annual financial reporting. So if a multinational corporate groups adopt IFRS, it's going to be quite easy. Before IFRS, for example, you have a company in Nigeria. The parent company is in Nigeria. The what's it called now? The subsidiary company is in the UK. Okay, the subsidiary company, obviously we adopt UK national GAAP. Okay, UK GAAP, right? So when you are consolidating, there's a lot of problems. So you have to start converting. Apart from the currency now, you still need to convert the underlying accounting assumptions and policies and standards. All right. So, but if all of you adopt IFRS, all you need to do is to just go straight. It will streamline and it will save a lot of energy and time. Entities may believe that the adoption of IFRS will assist in their effort to raise capital, of course, because you are IFRS compliant. Because it is assumed that if you apply IFRS, it is more transparent. Okay, it is more transparent. Apart from if you are doing window dressing, and I think I thought you had to do window dressing. I didn't ask you to be doing it in life, right? In real life, right? I just want to tell you so that you are aware of what it's all about. Okay, for example, if potential capital provider are familiar with IFRS, it may be easier for their evaluation on capital investment opportunity. Okay, so entities may believe that they are actually doing the right thing by adopting IFRS, as it is already used by others, usually listed for large companies. Okay, so you should know a few of those points in case you see it in your exam, right? So let's now look at some key definitions. So you need to be with me here, okay? You need to be with me. So who is a first-time adopter? Okay, the first-time adopter. This is an entity that for the first time makes an explicit and unreserved statement that its general purpose financial statement comply with IFRS. So that's a first time adopter. You just made that statement once in your account, in your what's it called, your financial, in your annual financial statement. For example, if you adopt it then in 2012, so that's 1st January 2012, your opening balances must have been converted to IFRS. So by December, you will now make an explicit and all reserved statement that your financial statement complies with IFRS. So an entity can also be a first-time adopter if in the preceding year its financial statement asserted compliance with some but not IFRS. You know, before we even adopted, a lot of companies has already been working on the IFRS. Immediately Nigeria, agree. Okay, so even before the government or the NASB, then we have a FRCN has taken over the job of NASB. NASB is the National Accounting Standard Board. Okay, I think that job has now been taken over by the Federal Reporting Council of Nigeria. Okay, all right. So, and if you are certain in the previous preceding year, okay, that you made an assertion that you comply with some IFRSs, then you also included only a reconciliation of selected figures from previous GAAP to IFRS. Okay, previous GAAP means GAAP that the entity follow immediately before adopting IFRS. Now listen, however, an entity is not a first-time adopter if in the preceding year its financial statement assert that compliance with IFRS, okay, even if the auditor reports contain a qualification with respect to conformity with IFRS, then compliance with both previous GAAP and IFRS. Okay, so you are not a first-time adopter. Okay, you are not a first-time adopter. Okay, so let's look at first IFRS financial statement. Okay, so this is the first annual financial statement in which an entity adopts IFRS by explicit and unreserved, by making an explicit and unreserved statement of compliance. Okay, just like we said earlier. So that's your first IFRS. So the account that you prepare and you made that statement that you have adopted IFRS. Don't forget, you cannot be making that statement every year. You just make it in your very first financial statement. But if your company is just coming up, for example, you are just incorporating, normally you are coming into IFRS, so you don't need to say you comply with IFRS. Okay, so you are not a first-time adopter. Okay, now date of transition to IFRS, this is very key. That's the beginning of the earliest comparative period for which an entity presents full comparative information under IFRS in its first financial statement. That's the date of transition. So if my account ends December 2019, okay, and I did a comparative period, okay, now hold on, let me give a date to you so that you understand. So my account for 2019, at the beginning of 2019, I need to comply with IFRS because the government is saying I must comply with IFRS. Okay, so that means I need to change the opening balance of the figures, or I need to adjust the figures, because we have complied with the previous GAAP. So I need to convert those figures into IFRS compliance. Okay, at 1st January 2019. So my date of transition is 1st January 2018. That's why they call it the beginning of the earliest comparative period. Okay, because you need to compare. Okay, even though 2018 accounts were done under SCS or National GAAP as the case may be, so but you still need to go back and convert them to IFRS so that you can compare. So that is your date. That's what they call the beginning of the earliest comparative period for which an entity presents full comparative information under IFRS. Okay, so that's what we call date of transition. Then opening financial statement. Okay, opening IFRS statement of financial position, entity statement of financial position at the date of transition to IFRS. That's what I just said. So first IFRS reporting date, the latest reporting date that covered the entity first, like I said, if it's 2019, so your first IFRS reporting date is December 2019. So in Nigeria, the date of transition was established by the provisions of the National Roadmap on IFRS. You know, I told you when we did adoption of IFRS. Okay, so let's look at the opening IFRS financial statements prepared by full retrospective application. Can you see that? Of all IFRS extant at the first IFRS reporting date. So let's now look at example now to further demonstrate those terminology. So the company is preparing its first financial IFRS financial statement for the year ended December 31, 2015. So the company operates in a regime that requires a single period comparative information. Okay, so first IFRS reporting date is 31st December. Can you see that? That's the first IFRS reporting date. Okay, now first IFRS financial statement. Okay, so financial statements prepared to above year, the all IFRS standard on this date are applied retrospective, so subject to permission, permitted exemptions and mandatory. Okay, so what is now the date of transition? So if I'm preparing my account as at December 31, 2015, so my date of transition is 1st January. That's what I explained. Can you see now? It's 1st January 2014. Especially if they only require just one period comparison. So I'll go to 1st January 2014 and also convert them, those opening balances, into IFRS. Okay, so that's what we call the date of transition to IFRS. The opening financial statement, all IFRS statement of financial position based on that above date. Okay, so that's it. That's what you need to know about that. So what are the issues to consider? This is highly examinable. Okay, it's highly examinable, but I guess most examiner, you don't even want to bother students about IFRS 1 because it's gone. It's just came, you know, at that time. So it was coming up in exams, but most countries now have adopted IFRS. All countries except the US. So we still have the US GAAP that is still, you know, operational. Okay, although the IASB are trying to, you know, make looking at the provisions of the US GAAP and see some amendments and similarities. For example, IFRS 13, IS 12 is almost the same with the US GAAP. Yeah, especially the definition of IFRS 13. That's fair value measurement. Okay, it's the same with the US GAAP. So that's what they are doing currently. So they are still trying to see. And I think I told you why the USA has not adopted IFRS. Okay, now, but for IFRS 1, we have 5 issues, okay, to consider. Okay, that means when you are adopting IFRS. Number 1, the date of transition to IFRS. I just explained that. So I'm still going to look at it again. Then number 2, which IFRS should be adopted? Obviously, you can't adopt all of those IFRSs. So you have to, which one are you adopting? Which one is peculiar to you? So these are the issues you need to consider. And these are the areas that the examiner might test your understanding on IFRS 1. And number 2, how gains and losses arising on adopting IFRS should be accounted for. Okay, so because when you, especially when you're doing those conversions, there will be gains, there will be losses. How should they be accounted for? For example, IFRS 1 says some of them should be recorded in the retained profit. Okay, so we're going to find out when we get there. Then the explanation and disclosures to be made in the year of transition. So what explanation, what disclosure is required? Then what exemptions are available? So those are the 5 things. If you don't know anything under IFRS 1, I'm begging you, you must know these 5 things. Number 1, the date of transition to IFRS. Number 2, what IFRS should be adopted. Number 3, how gains and losses arising on adoption of IFRS should be adopted or accounted for. Okay, number 4, the explanations and disclosures to be made in the year of transition. And the last one, what exemptions are available. So you must know all those 5. Okay, so let's now try to explain the date of transition. I've already explained that's the beginning of the earliest comparative period for which an entity presents full comparative information under IFRS. Okay, so IFRS should be applied from the first day of the first set of financial statements. Okay, so because IFRS require comparative statement to employees, so the opening IFRS statement of the financial position for an entity adopting IFRS for the first time in December 20XA and presenting 1-year comparative information will now be 1st January 2007. So I've already explained that. So you can go through all of that. So you should be able to explain to the examiner, okay? At least you should be able to do this for the examiner. Then you pick any of these, or use those dates to also demonstrate your understanding. Now, which IFRS should be adopted? So you need to be with me here, okay? So which IFRS should be adopted? Now, the entity should use the same accounting policy for all periods presented. This policy should be based solely on IFRS in force at the reporting date. So the major problem for entities preparing for a changeover is that IFRS themselves, they keep changing because that's it. Let me give you a classical example. Look at IFRS 9. Yeah, IFRS 9 was, I think it was effective 1st January 2018. It was amended 1st January 2019. Can you imagine? Just 1 year. So that's the problem. So even if you're adopting one IFRS now, right, it could change. It's changing. So that's the problem, okay? Therefore, entity may now apply IFRS that is not yet mandatory. And if IFRS permits earlier application. So these are the challenges. Now, IFRS 1 state that the opening IFRS financial position. Now, so which IFRS should be adopted? You must recognize all assets and liability required by IFRS. Don't recognize assets and liabilities not permitted by IFRS, okay? So reclassify all assets and liabilities and equity components in accordance with IFRS. They measure all assets and liability in accordance with IFRS. That's it. So anytime you are talking about which IFRS should be adopted, all you need to tell the examiner is recognize all assets and liabilities required by IFRS, not recognize assets and liabilities not permitted by IFRS, reclassify all assets and liabilities and equity components in accordance with IFRS, then measure all assets and liabilities in accordance with IFRS. That's it. So you move on. Then how do we account for gain and losses? Okay, I think I told you earlier, you just recognize it directly in your MCNN. That's it. So any gain and loss arising on the adoption of IFRS should be recognized directly in the retained earnings. In other words, they are not recognized in profit or loss. That's it. So when you are doing your conversion, when you are measuring your assets in compliance with IFRS, you are measuring your liability. So gains and losses can arise. Just throw it into your retained profit. Okay. So what disclosures need to be made? There are two key disclosures that must be made on adopting IFRS. Okay, that's the explanation now. Can you see that? It's very simple, right? The entity equity as reported under previous GAAP. Can you see that? Your equity, how did you report it under previous GAAP? So you must reconcile to the equity reported under IFRS at the due date. So the date of transition and the last statement of financial position prepared under previous GAAP. So you need to disclose it. You have to do a reconciliation on the way you have reported your equity in the previous GAAP and how you have reported it in the current under new IFRS. Okay, and your second disclosure, there are just two, is the last annual reported under previous GAAP must be reconciled with the same year's total comprehensive income. So when you do your equity, that's the first one. You also look at the total comprehensive income. Okay, so that's your annual total comprehensive income. How was it reported under the previous GAAP, and how did you report it under the new IFRS? So when you are now doing that, any material differences between the previous GAAP and the IFRS statement of cash flow must be explained. So you have to highlight them. What are the material differences? Are they within your operating activity, your financing activity, or your investing activity? Okay, so when preparing your first IFRS financial statement, an entity must identify errors made in the previous year. So when you are changing over, you now discover, oh, that was an error. So this correction of errors must also be disclosed separately. So these are the disclosure, especially when you are doing the reconciliation for your total comprehensive income. So when preparing IFRS financial statement for the first time, the fair value of property, plant, and equipment, intangible assets, and investment property can be used as deemed cost. Can you see that? So what is deemed cost? This is the second time we are saying the word deemed cost. I think we first saw it under IAS 41 agriculture. If you remember, when we said at the point of harvest, you must measure agricultural produce, are their fair value less cost to sell. So after harvest, IAS 41 will cease to apply. Then IFRS 2 inventory will start to apply. So the initial measurement that you just did will now be the deemed cost for the purpose of IAS 2 inventory. Now, you remember, right? Okay. So simply put, deemed cost is a surrogate cost, right? So all you need to do is the fair value of, IFRS talks more about fair value, fair value, fair value. So you just use the fair value as deemed cost. So if so, the entity must now disclose the aggregate of those fair values and the adjustment made to the accruing amount under the previous GAAP. Okay, so that is your disclosure. And the last one is the exemption. So what are the exemptions that are allowed or permitted by IFRS 1? So, but there are limited exemptions in situation where cost of compliance will outweigh the benefit for user. For example, in business combination, okay, previously you do not have to previous business combination do not have to be restated in accordance with IFRS. Okay, so in particular, mergers, that's pooling of interest, do not have to be accounted for as acquisition. So previously written off goodwill does not have to be restated, and the fair values of assets may be retained. However, any impairment test for any remaining goodwill must be made in the opening statement of financial position. So obviously, what they are just trying to do is your previous business combination don't need to restate it. Just leave it like that, just carry it like that. So that's an exemption. Normally, don't forget that you need to remeasure all your assets and liability. Don't remeasure asset and liability not required by IFRS, okay? But IFRS 1 is also now giving certain exemption. For example, your previous business combination just continue to carry that investment. However, we don't reinstate your goodwill if it has already been, written off. Okay, then any impairment, any goodwill that is remaining must be subject to impairment review. Then an entity can also choose to deem past translation gains and losses on overseas subsidiary to be nil. Okay, so on conversion, so that's another exemption. So any deemed past translation gains or loss. So when you are translating, can you remember when we did IAS 21? So all those gains and losses, you can just take it to be nil. Okay, so that's another exemption that was given. Okay, by IFRS 1. And then need not to restate the borrowing cost component that was capitalized under previous GAAP. So you don't need to restate it. Okay, the date of transition to IFRS. Okay, however, our borrowing cost from the date of that transition should now be capitalized if the conditions of IAS 23 are met. So I'm sure you can relate with what is there because we dealt with IAS 23 the last one of our lectures, right? Under IAS 32, the process of convertible debt are split into liability component and equity component. Okay, so if debt had been paid or had been repaid by the date of transition, so no adjustment is required. Okay, to recognize equity component upon adopting IFRS. That's IAS 32, financial instrument. Okay, then if a subsidiary adopts IFRS later than its parent, then the subsidiary may value its assets either at its own translation date or at its own transition date or at its parent transition date, would normally would be easier. Okay, so those are the exemptions. So there are some situations where retrospective application of IFRS are prohibited. Okay, you don't go. What's the meaning of retrospective application? That means you go back to last year, more than 1 year, more than 2 years. Okay, so in other words, the carrying amount or the carrying values of assets and liabilities in the closing statement of financial position under the GAAP are brought into the opening statement of financial position. So you don't go and do adjustment. All you need to do is just bring, the carrying amount. So they include the recognition of financial assets and liabilities. So if a first-time adopter of IFRS, they recognize financial assets and liabilities under previous GAAP, they are not recognized under IFRS. Okay, edge accounting, that's number 2, if I'm correct. Okay, edge accounting. Okay, estimate of such market values. Okay, such as exchange rate, interest rates. An entity estimate in accordance with IFRS at the date of transition to IFRS shall be consistent with estimate made at the same day in accordance with the previous GAAP. there's some element of government grant. Okay. Now, if a first-time adopter did not, under previous GAAP, recognize and measure government, measure a government loan at a under previous GAAP, recognize and measure a government loan at a below the rate of interest on the basis of consistent with IFRS requirements, should use previous GAAP carrying amount of the loan at the date of transition. Okay. So an entity shall apply IFRS 9 to the measurement of such loans after the date of transition. So just lift the carrying amount, they now start to apply IFRS 9. Okay. That's it. So you can now look at implications for adopting IFRS. So it's never an easy project for many companies. Okay. So these are the number of considerations to be made. So the examiner can also ask you, what do you think? What are the factors to be considered? Okay, in adopting IFRS. Number one, you need to do what we call initial evaluation. Okay, do you have anybody in the company that has the knowledge of IFRS? That's why I said a lot of consulting firms, they really made a lot of money. They went to the book room and start reading, start studying IFRS. How do we convert? Okay, are there any agreements such as bank covenant? Okay, so those are the things you need to consider. All these ones you can easily go through them. Okay, so that's the initial evaluation you need to do. So you can see the explanations there. So in case the examiner should ask you. So other considerations could be debt covenant. The entity will have to consider the impact of adopting IFRS on debt covenant on and other contracts. Okay, how do you now classify them? Performance related pay. Okay, performance related pay. So there are potential impacts on income of moving to IFRS, which causes a problem in designing appropriate means of determining or executing problem. You know, look at gain and losses. The IFRS says you should be taken to your retained profit. Okay, just straight to retained profit. So the question is, are they really earned? Okay, on remeasurement. Okay, so that's the issue. Look at even IAS 21, effect of changes in foreign exchange rates. Okay, so that's what you look out for there. Then view of financial analysis. So there are key considerations that must be considered. Okay, that you need to consider when adopting IFRS. Okay, so let's look at how the examiner can ask questions in this area. So let's look at this. NAT is the company that used to prepare financial statements under local standards. Their first time IFRS financial statement for the year ended December 2025, and this will include comparative information for previous financial year. Its previous GAAP financial statement are for years ended 31 December 2023 and 2024. The directors are unsure about the following issues. Okay, so issue one, NAT received 5 million in advance orders for a new product on 31 December 2023. This product were not dispatched until 20x4. In accordance with the previous GAAP, this 5 million was recognized as revenue. Oh, okay. That's interesting. Okay. Now, number two, a restructuring provision of 1 million relating to head office activities was recognized in December 2023 in accordance with the previous GAAP. This does not qualify for recognition as liability in accordance with IFRS. Oh, really? Okay. NAT made estimate of accrued expenses and provisions as at 31 December 2023. Some of these estimates turn out to be understated. Oh, those are errors, right? Now I believe that this estimate were reasonable in line with the requirements in both previous GAAP and the IFRS. Okay, so in accordance with IFRS 1, how should the issues be dealt with? Okay, so that's what the examiner is asking also. I will look at my date again because date is very important. Okay, their first IFRS financial statement, okay, is 20x5, okay, and this will include comparative information of the previous year. Okay, so that's 20x4, January 20x4. Its previous GAAP financial statement will now end in December 20x3 and 20x4. Yeah, okay, that's fine. All right, so we now said they received 5 million in advance orders in 20x3. Okay, so this would have been treated under the previous GAAP. Most likely, they have even recognized the whole revenue. Okay, they have recognized the whole revenue. So these products were not dispatched until 2004. Okay, even 2004 is still under previous gap. Okay, because we have been told here. Okay, we have been told here that its previous gap financial statement are for this year. Okay, meanwhile, however, when I'm doing my first time financial IFRS compliance statement, I need to go back to 20X4, okay, and convert to IFRS. Okay, so in line with the previous guide, this 5 million was recognized, so we need to recognize it, right? We need to go back there and recognize. So let's see what the answer looks like. So the sale does not meet revenue recognition as IFRS. That's it. So it does not really mean, because when we treat revenue recognition, you understand better, because you need to identify a contract with customer. You have to apply 5-step revenue model. Identify a contract with customer, okay? Identify separate performance obligation within the contract. I will explain, don't worry, when we get there. I'm just trying to do that so that you can understand what we're saying here. The step 3, determine the transaction price, okay? Then step 4, allocate the transaction price to the performance obligation based on stand-alone selling price. Then step 5, you now recognize revenue as or when performance obligation is being satisfied. Okay, so we are now under the previous gap now. Meanwhile, those money, the whole of that 5 million is already, so you have to recognize because the control has not transferred. Okay, so in the opening IFRS financial statement, can you see now 20X4, a contract liability will have to be recognized. Okay, so the 5 million loss, the 5 million loss on recognition is a liability and be accounted for in the retained earnings. Okay, so that's what you do. That's what you do. So let's look at the second one. A restructuring provision of 1 million relating to head office activities was recognized in accordance with the previous gap. Okay, this does not qualify for recognition in. Oh, okay. So what they have done here is restructuring provision of 1 million was recognized, and under IAS 37, it was not supposed to be. So don't worry, when I teach you IAS 37, we're going to look at restructuring. What does it really mean, right? So it's not recognized. So obviously, this is a gain. It should be a gain. So it will now be taken into my, what was it called? Retained profit. Okay, so let's find out. Is that what they are saying there? Okay, the provision does not meet the criteria of IAS 37. Okay, so in the opening financial position, the provision should be de-recognized. Okay, so the 1 million gain on the recognition of provision will now be accounted for in the retained earnings. That's it. So it has to be de-recognized. Okay, so so let's look at the what's it called? The last one there, and we say bye-bye to IFRS 1. NAT made estimates of accrued expenses and provisions at December 20X rate. Some of these estimates turn out to be understated. That's an error, right? Okay, so now believe that this estimate were reasonable and in line with requirements of both. Oh, they were reasonable. Okay, so that should be IAS 8. Okay, so because in the process of conversion, they now discovered an error and they think is not really material. Okay, since it's not material, they can do prospective adjusting. Okay, they can do prospective adjusting in line, but if it's material, obviously they will do retrospective, they will do what's it called, retrospective adjusting. So let's now see, let's see what the answer looks like. Although some of these accruals and provisions turn out to be underestimated, not to conclude that its estimate were reasonable. Okay, so therefore no error at all. Okay, so in accordance with IAS 8, okay, can you see this should be accounted for prospectively? That's it. So prospectively means from now into the future, right? So therefore, additional expense will be recognized in the IFRS profit or loss figures for the year ended 31st December 2020. And that's the end of that question. So what are the challenges of harmonization of accounting standards? So you should know this. The examiner can also come around this area. You have legal system, professional, traditional user groups, and the like. So there are also benefits, okay? There are benefits, multinational entities, investors, international economic groups, and the likes. Okay, so you can read all of that. So you have one review questions there, one review question to further solidify your understanding on IFRS 1. Okay, on IFRS 1. Okay, so that's the end of IFRS 1. Thank you for your time. So let me see if I have one or two questions to demonstrate or to answer. I think topics like this require the use of board. You said you were working on getting a board since last year. Not for this. Not for this. For this program. What I said was we are working for next edition to see if you can get a magnetic board. Not the normal board. Not the normal classroom board. I'll just connect to my system. When I write on that, a small magnetic board, you see it on the screen. So that's what you're saying. Okay, so but we have to manage what we have for now. That's why we try to show. That's why you have the solution there and try to explain how we get those solutions. So you then go back and go through them. Okay. Thank you for your comments. There's no other question. Okay, so thank you for your time. I'm going to see you next week by God's grace. We shall be starting with IAS 20. We look at IFRS for SMEs. Subsequently, we look at IAS 19. I think financial instruments. Okay, so I'll see you next week. You need to start case study now. All right, enjoy your evening. Thank you.